What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and today I'm going to be showing you how to build an RTX 3080 gaming PC build for around about a $1,500 budget. I'm going to take you through all the parts I chose and why, the build process from start to finish, step by step, before booting this machine up and testing it out with over 10 of the most popular titles. Without any further ado though, let's jump into it. But first, a big thanks to today's video sponsor, Surfshark. In the ocean of online content, there's loads of little crabs that can take a peek at what you do online, and that's where Surfshark comes in. It's a VPN or virtual private network that lets you swim literally under the radar. No more targeted ads or beady eyes or your ISP being able to see your internet traffic. The best bit though, when you swim under the radar, you can do so from a load of different countries. Want to watch US Netflix shows in the UK and UK Netflix shows in the US? Oh, and of course it doesn't just work for Netflix. Protect your data and get the freedom online you deserve. If you head to the link in the description below, you can get a ginormous 83% off the Surfshark regular price, plus 3 months completely free. That's 3 months of free VPN. Oh, and if for some reason you don't like it, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Big up Surfshark for sponsoring today's video and hooking up with the insane deal linked in the description below. As with all of my builds, we're going to kick things off installing the CPU, the RAM, and the SSD into our motherboard today. Now, I've actually gone B550. This is going to save us a little bit of money and crucially allow us to spend just a little bit more money on our CPU and our graphics card in particular. This B550 AORUS Pro is on the slightly higher end of the B550 spectrum and is going to be great for today's build. Inside of it, I'm installing AMD's Ryzen 7 3700X. This is going to be great for a bit of streaming as well. Now, AMD have of course just announced the new 5000 series desktop chips, but there is a little bit of a price bump on those, so we'll have to see exactly how they perform for a build like this. Next up today then, I'm going to install the RAM into the motherboard. This is a fairly innocent 16GB kit from Corsair. It's super great value, and at over 3000 MHz is a great choice for today's build. Installing it's really easy. Pull back the clips on the second and fourth DIMM slots, and it's a simple case of aligning the notch on the RAM DIMM with the corresponding notch on your motherboard. With even pressure to both sides, it's going to clip in nice and easily, and just repeat for as many RAM DIMMs as you've got. Next up then today, the final thing before we go ahead and move the motherboard into the case, I'm going to spin it around so we can install our M.2 SSD. You need to remove this pre-installed black heatsink, just like so, as well as this little tiny retainer screw. And for this, you are going to need a teeny tiny little screwdriver. Talking of storage, I've got a 1TB drive from XPG. I've used this quite a lot, but it's really good value, looks pretty fantastic. And similarly to the RAM, it's a simple case of lining the notch on the M.2 drive with the notch on the slot in the motherboard. Screw it back down, and then we're actually going to leave the heatsink off so we can see the RGB drive in all of its glory. The next step today then is to install the motherboard assembly, as we're going to call it, into the case. Now, this in particular is the Corsair 4000D Airflow. You guys will have seen that I've used their... Before things nearly went wrong, I was saying I've used their 275R Airflow case loads, and this is kind of the spiritual successor. With a nice big tempered glass side panel that we're going to go ahead and remove, as well as plenty of airflow on this front panel for super low temperatures, it's a really great value case for today's build. Now, in the back of the case, just here, you'll find a little box. Now, this has all the screws and stuff we need to install pretty much all of our components today. Oh, that's a really neat touch. You also get some Corsair Velcro cable ties. To install the motherboard, you need to take this bag of included screws, and we're going to also need to check that we've got all the appropriate standoffs installed. And these should just be located below each of the holes through the motherboard. This motherboard already has the IO shield pre-installed, which means it's a simple case of sliding it. And actually, Corsair's raised center standoff is going to hold the motherboard nicely in place. And it's a simple case of just screwing in the 3 rows of 3 standoffs, so 9 in total. Alright then, I think the next step is to install our CPU cooler today. This is the Corsair A500. It's a pretty new cooler from them and one of their first kind of entries into the air-cooled market. This is a cheaper option than going for something like an all-in-one liquid cooler, but it still gives you some great cooling performance. We've got a peel. Look at the size of that. Wow. Okay, so this actually seems pretty easy. We're going to use the included AMD backplate that comes with your motherboard, as well as these brackets and these black spacers that come included with the cooler. Now then, with that done, it's a simple case of temporarily removing the heatsink CPU cover. Probably a good idea to lay the case down flat for this bit, so that we can easily use the long screwdriver to just fasten the cooler down to that back plate. That's looking pretty good, I think. Let's clear the table off before installing the power supply, and then of course the graphics card, which I know you're all the most excited about. Talking of power supplies, James, why have you got two? Well, you can get this in either 750 or 650 watts, and it also comes in white or black, and this actually has an RGB fan. I'm going to go for the black unit for today's build, but 750 watts is probably where you want to go. 650 is going to be fine though today. As far as actually budget modular power supplies go, this is looking pretty good so far. Black cables, a compact, quite weighty power supply. Now, we're not actually going to need all the cables today, but the ones we do need are a 24-pin motherboard power cable, a dual 6+2-pin PCIe power connector, a SATA power harness, as well as finally a dual 4-pin CPU power connector. And just keep the rest safe in case you want to upgrade your parts or change computers a bit later on. In this case, we can actually install the fan facing up or down. If you're going to be on a hard surface with plenty of clearance, downwards is probably your best option. Okay, with the power supply in, it makes sense to just do some of our cables and our wiring now, before we finally go ahead and install the graphics card. The first of those cables today is the biggest of the bunch. It's the 24-pin motherboard power cable, and it goes to the right-hand side of the motherboard, just like so. Next up then is our 4+4-pin CPU power connector, which goes to the top left of the motherboard, once again, nice and easily. We're also going to make sure all the ports at the top of the case are all plugged up, starting off with our HD audio, and that goes to the bottom left of the motherboard. It's got a pin missing, so we'll only go in one way around. The JFP1 cables are next. That's basically your power switch, hard drive indicator, LED, and all that good stuff. And these go to the bottom of the motherboard. They can be fiddly, so be careful, but I'll put a little diagram on your screen now. Just take it slow and you'll be fine. Okay then, it is finally time to install the graphics card today. As I said, hang tight because I'll be going into a really deep dive to see how this performs in a load of the most popular and the latest titles. This though is the Gigabyte RTX 3080 with their legendary Windforce cooling design. As far as aesthetics go, I think the card looks really great. It kind of sticks out a bit here. It's got quite a big stance, quite a big profile, and a little bit of lighting, a little bit of RGB up top, which I'm sure we will play around with later. Now, installing the graphics card is pretty easy. All we need to do is unscrew the second and third PCIe slots. And our graphics card is going to slide in, bit of a snug fit, just like so. And we're going to use these same screws that came off our PCIe slot to secure the graphics card into place. And all that really remains to be done is to give it power. In this case, two 8-pin power connectors. So you don't need like an ugly adapter or anything like that. And with that done, that pretty much wraps it up for the build process. I'm going to throw in a couple of cheeky Corsair RGB fans up front because we love RGB here on the GeekaWhat channel, but these are optional and I'll link them alongside all the other components today in the description below. With that being said though, before jumping into the performance, let's see how it looks when it's all powered up. Roll the montage. Okay then, now you've seen just how good this system looks when it's all powered up, and of course the process of putting it together, step by step, let's take a dive and see how it performs. I've tested a wide range of titles today, all the way from the latest, most demanding AAA titles to some slightly older games, but still really popular, so you can get a consistent, even picture of just how it performs. Let's kick things off with GTA 5's inbuilt benchmarking mode. At 4K high settings, you're looking at an average of 69 frames per second, with 90 and 99th percentile results of 63 and 56 respectively. Now bear in mind this is with pretty much everything cranked to max, and our render bars set to halfway, so drop down to 4K medium, you're looking closer to 100 FPS, and 1440p, you're looking well over those 3 digits. Next up then today is Control, one of the latest titles out there, and of course a game that supports ray tracing. Pushing the 3080 to its limits, here we saw an average of 82 frames per second, with 90 and 99th percentile results of 74 and 71 respectively. Now in terms of settings, this was 4K high settings, with RTX set to medium and DLSS at 1440p, meaning the graphics card's rendering the game at 1440p, and then using AI and machine learning to upscale to 4K, giving you higher frame rates at higher resolutions. Next up then is Apex Legends, the first of the 3 Battle Royale games that I always test out and that you guys really like to see. 4K medium to high settings, you're looking at an average of 128 frames per second, with 90 and 99th percentile results in the region of 103 and 98 respectively. Visually the game looked great, no lag, no stuttering, no screen tearing, as you would expect. Next up today is Call of Duty's Warzone, a game that in the free Battle Royale mode doesn't actually support ray tracing. Fun fact, the settings that say ray tracing do nothing in the Warzone game mode, which is a real shame really. Either way though, 1440p high settings, so some slightly more competitive settings at a low resolution, you're looking at 112 FPS on average, with 193 for your 90th and 99th percentile results. Some really fantastic numbers here. Next up is Forza Horizon 4. It's on the newer end of the game spectrum today, but is a little bit easier to run. And that's proven at 4K ultra settings, where you're looking at an average of 122 frames per second, with 105 and 95 for your 90th and 99th percentile results. Forza Horizon 4 looks incredibly realistic and is a boatload of fun. Next up then is Overwatch, even more fun than Forza Horizon I would argue, and here at 4K ultra settings you're looking at an average of 203 FPS. It's a similar story with your 90th and 99th percentile results in the region of 173 and 140 respectively. I actually had a pretty good game of Overwatch today as well, so big W's only. Talking of big W's, the frame rate in CSGO. At 4K high settings, you're looking at an average of 305 frames per second. And yes, this was with unlimited FPS, using the kind of CSGO command line interface. Really great numbers, and CSGO actually looked surprisingly realistic for a game that is years and years old at this point. Next up today then is Battlefield 5, another ray tracing compatible title on my list, and at 1440p high settings, with ray tracing disabled actually, more on that in a second, and DLSS enabled, so a really great feature once again that allows you to render the game at a slightly lower resolution and upscale for maximum frame rate. And here you're seeing an average of 122 FPS, with 106 and 87 for the 90 and 99th percentiles. Ray tracing looks great in Battlefield 5, but if you're after 100 plus FPS, then disabling it is the way to go, and visually the game still looks pretty stunning. Next up then today is the penultimate game on my list. It is of course Doom Eternal. 4K Ultra Nightmare, what a game preset with VSync disabled. It's a really good test of rasterization, and it pushes the 3080 to its limits despite the lack of ray tracing support. 141 FPS on average, with 133 and 129 for those 90 and 99th results, and the game looked unreal, especially with HDR enabled as well. Finally then today, it is Fortnite, the game a lot of you will have been waiting, skipping through the video for. Don't you worry, I know what you're like. 4K high settings, RTX disabled, DLSS performance mode, 152 FPS on average. At 4K high settings, I mean, that is unreal. real. 122 frames per second for the 90th percentile and 106 for the 99th. So all around, no complaints from me. With that being said though, that pretty much wraps it up for not just the benchmark section today, but the whole video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a big old like rating and get subscribed for more from me. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.